Good morning, friends. Happy Thursday. New Katie's here. She's thrilled about it. She's thrilled about everything all the time. I wanted to tell y'all a story today, so I hope you will stick with me. This morning, the Lord and I were talking a lot about faith, which pretty much means that I was thinking about faith and a phrase would come to mind or an old scripture would come to mind and I would Google it to find it or look it up, and then I would read those verses. So I ended up in Romans 4, and what I wanted to do this morning is just read you some of Romans 4. I'm going to also, here are the other scriptures that I was at today, if you want to screenshot that and look those up later. They're right there. So I'm going to read you some of Romans 4 in the Message. You can read along or listen along, whatever makes you happy. And we're going to talk about faith, being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you cannot see. So how do we fit what we know of Abraham, our first father in the faith, into this new way of looking at things? If Abraham, by what he did for God, got God to approve him, he could certainly have taken credit for it. But the story we're given is a God story, not an Abraham story. What we read in scripture is Abraham entered into what God was doing for him, and that was the turning point. He trusted God to set him right instead of trying to be right on his own. If you're a hard worker and do a good job, you deserve your pay. We don't call your wages a gift. But if you see that the job is too big for you, that it's something only God can do, and you trust him to do it, you could never do it for yourself, no matter how hard and long you worked. Well, that trusting him to do it is what gets you set right with God, by God, sheer gift. We're going to skip down here to verse 13. That famous promise that God gave Abraham that he and his children would possess the earth was not given because of something Abraham did or would do. It was based on God's decision to put everything together for him. Abraham then entered when he believed. If those who get what God gives them only get it by doing everything they're told to do and filling out all the right forms properly signed, that eliminates personal trust completely and turns the promise into an ironclad contract. That's not a holy promise. That's a business deal. A contract drawn up by a hard-nosed lawyer and with plenty of fine print only makes sure that you will never be able to collect. But if there is no contract in the first place, simply a promise, and God's promise that you can't break it. This is why the fulfillment of God's promise depends entirely on trusting God in his way, and then simply embracing him in what he does. God's promise arrives as pure gift. That's the only way everyone can be sure to get in on it, those who keep the religious traditions and those who've never heard of them. For Abraham is father of us all. He is not our racial father. That's reading the story backwards. He is our faith father. Stick with me. Just a few more verses. This stuff is so good. Stay. Come on. You can do it. We call Abraham father not because he's got God's attention by living like a saint, but because God made something out of Abraham when he was a nobody. Isn't that what we've always read in scripture? God saying to Abraham, I set you up as a father of many peoples. Abraham was first named father and then became a father because he dared to trust God to do what only God could do. Raise the dead to life. With a word, make something out of nothing. When everything was hopeless, Abraham believed anyway, deciding to live not on the basis of what he saw he couldn't do, but on what God said he would do. And so he was made the father of a multitude of people. God himself said to him, you're going to have a big family, Abraham. And Abraham didn't focus on his own impotence and say, it's hopeless. This 100-year-old body could never father a child. Nor did he survey Sarah's decades of infertility and give up. Okay, here's the big ending. This is incredible, okay? This is awesome. He didn't tiptoe around God's promises, asking cautiously skeptical questions. He plunged into the promise and came up strong, ready for God, sure that God would make good on what he had said. That's why it is said Abraham was declared fit before God by trusting God to set him right. But it's not just Abraham, it's also us. The same thing gets said about us when we embrace and believe the one who brought Jesus to life. When the conditions were equally hopeless, the sacrifice Jesus made us fit for God, set us right with God. I mean, come on with that, right? I mean, that is incredible. That part where it says that he plunged into the promise and came up strong. What are you believing God for today? Can you plunge into the promise that he is for you? Well, there you go. Your Thursday sermon from Annie. I'm sorry, or you're welcome, or whatever, but that's who I want to be. I want to be like Abraham. I want to be someone who believes God even when I can't see everything. I just want to believe him. Let's be people of faith.